wish list for Freedom Forum. We need all kinds of things and donations. So if you have anything that's come along, let us know. We'd appreciate it much. Meet your neighbors sometime during the evening. Turn around and talk to who's next to you. Find out if it's somebody you know, somebody you want to know, how it all works. We will have community announcements here shortly, and we ask that those be held to 1 minute with an absolute maximum of 2 minutes. And we certainly appreciate coming. We appreciate the announcements. I think a young lady named Fox is coming over here to tell us what she thinks. So Fox, the microphone is yours.
I'm Fox Sloan with Child and Family Rights Response Team here in Santa Cruz County, and a week ago this Tuesday up in Contra Costa County at the Walnut Creek courthouse where the child and dependency hearings are held, we had an epic march. There were over 100 people. Wow. And 4 news outlets, and a big thank you to Michelle Chan, who spent months organizing this. She gave us all the media outlet contact information, so we bombarded them with requests. Please attend and please cover this, because we are raising awareness of the issue that dependency and family courts are dysfunctional and they are not serving our families, and especially our children. So this was huge for us, and it was like the beginning of the end for dependency and family court remaining under the veil of secrecy. So a big thanks to Michelle Chan, and we've got some more events coming up. And I'm going to turn this over to Romina, because we met with Mark Stone last week, and she'll update you on that. It was also epic.
Mark Stone.
Mark Stone introduced a bill called 2044. It's an AV bill. It passed through the Assembly. What it does is it eliminates visitation on the basis of accusations. And if you want to know why that's important, is because domestic violence has become the silver bullet of divorce. And in the past, though, if you accuse someone of domestic violence, you're given a restraining order, you got the house, you were absolved of paying spousal support, and you got custody of the kids. What this bill does is adds on visitation of the kids. And why Santa Cruz should also be aware of this bill is this young lady right here is Alicia Masidi. Her uncle is Mark Masidi Miller. He's the one in charge of the rail and trail. He's the engineer behind it. The aunt was Diane Masidi. She was married to Mark Masidi. The bad Mark Masidi was the accuser in this divorce. So he accused the mom. Turns out that the judge gave the children to the accuser, who turned out to be the abuser. He drugged, raped, killed her, buried her in his backyard, and just in February got life without parole, not only for his own daughter, but for other children. So what this bill does is, our argument against it is, who says that the accuser isn't the abuser? And when you eliminate visitation of an entire side of the family from a child's life, it takes a village to protect a child, and you just stop that from being able to happen. So we're asking you to call him and tell him to get rid of this bill.
Wow.
To call Mark Stone.
Call Mark Stone. Tell him.
Wow.
I'd like to call a few things. If those of you that don't know, Mark Stone has competition this year. Her name is Vicki Norton. She's a wonderful pro-parental rights woman, great woman. She deserves your vote. There's only 2 people running, so they're both going to make it through to November. So keep that in mind. I, on the other hand, represent this dynamic guy who's running for governor named Travis Allen. Yay. I know a lot of you heard of Travis. I see a lot of your faces. A lot of you guys are at the Aptos event and got to meet, get your picture taken with Travis, and hear his plan to save our state. I've got some information back there. I've got yard signs. We're going to be doing a banner wave Thursday and Friday on the Parenta 40 overpass. We have plenty of signs. Show up, grab a sign, hoop and holler to all the people stuck in traffic. We have a captive audience. Thursday and every Friday until election. Parenta 40 overpass 4 to 6. And we have a couple good special guests here tonight. George is here from KSCO. And Mr. Art, I messed up your,
Shopper.
Shopper is here, came all the way up from down south.
Yes.
Art,
All right, right from LA County.
State.
Yes.
Thank you, Art. All right, thanks, guys.
Well, good evening. I'm Ron Cabot. I'm a CPA down in Carmel, and I'm running against Jimmy Panetta.
Yes.
Thank you. When I was interviewed at KSBW, if they show it on TV, you'll see that I lead with sanctuary state issues and the federal government, as well as illegal immigration, that the federal people have the say-so over the immigration policies. That is, if KSBW shows it next week, we'll see. Okay. I followed that with, I had a veterans issue. I hear that a lot of veterans, we're talking about for homeless and disabled veterans, small, like tiny houses, and the problem that they're having is there's no land, or the land's too expensive. So I did some research, and I said, wow, the federal government owns over 900,000 square miles of land in our 10 western states. So I'm proposing that a feasibility study be done to find at least 100 square miles of habitable land out of the 900,000, okay?
There's plenty.
And once we find that, then we find out, okay, will these lands also be near VA clinics or VA hospitals in case they need
There you go.
to go to the hospitals from the towns. So what I'm basically proposing is like small towns that are built by vets and used by vets and run by vets. And the cost of the land should be next to nothing since it's federal government land. And I think we may be able to put something together, get into water, get into electricity, and create small towns for these people who need the help. And the last thing I talked about with KSBW is Social Security. And the problem with Social Security, again, is that the disability program runs insolvent in about 3 years. But what's even worse is the big Social Security retirement program runs insolvent in 15 years. So, yeah, I've complained about it for over 25 years and nothing's been done. And when I challenged Sam Farr, you probably heard of Sam Farr, at a town hall meeting and raised this issue about 5 years ago, Sam said, you know, I really don't mind it running insolvent because I'll be dead by the time that happens. So, I mean, you know, and nobody in the audience of that theater either booed him or catcalled him or anything on that issue. So,
Wow.
you figure, but unfortunately, he's still alive right now. I just talked to him last week. So, but Social Security is getting closer to the deadline, so.
And then what about that they borrowed twice, $2.9 billion out of Social Security? What about that?
Well, the last time I ran for office in 2014, the disability program was going broke again. It was becoming insolvent. And what happened after the election, after Sam Farr got elected, they took money, as you say, from the retirement fund and put it into the disability fund and then said, look, it's not insolvent anymore. And I said, yeah, but now we're going to go insolvent on the big fund earlier because of that. So I've got some proposals as to Social Security issues, and I don't want to bore you right now because it's going to be a good show tonight. But if you'd like a card, let me know, and I'll give you a card for contacts on me. Okay? Thank you. On the backs of some of these cards, you'll see that I'm purchasing time on KSCO. I'm going to have a 1-hour town hall call-in on Friday, the 25th at 3 o'clock. That's Georgia's second hour. She let me have it, but I paid for it.
Yeah.
And then the second hour on Saturday, if you're not available for the call-in on Friday, you can call in on Saturday, and that's going to be at 11 o'clock in the morning, the second hour of NC Saturday special. Okay, and there will be ads on KSCO starting next week to let everybody know about the town hall. Okay? All right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Ron. I think we have one more lady who has an announcement here, and then we'll get started with our program. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanne, volunteer. I wanted to mention that you've probably noticed, or maybe you haven't, that the phone poles are getting much taller in our county and many other counties close by. And they're putting on these funny-looking black horizontal boxes. They look like black metal cylinders on thick, almost like pipe wires. And they're making the wires horizontally up like 9 levels, 10 levels. And they're putting those white refrigerator, like small hotel type refrigerator boxes, that's gearing up for 5G. Now, last October, Governor Brown vetoed, in other words, said, no, we aren't going to have 5G in California. It's a very diabolical system that will connect us all to artificial intelligence and take over everything. And we need to start informing ourselves and talking to people. The next thing I wanted to mention was the FCC, the Federal Communications government, supposedly, organization, which is really private. They've been pushing Apple to put the antennas and the RF chips in their latest model phones. And Apple's claims to protect the public, it's almost funny because cell phones aren't real safe, but they say they did not put them in the Apple 7 and 8s to protect the public. But what you're getting is that the government agency is pushing these telecoms to load us up with antennas and RF chips. The second thing is, third thing, pardon me, you notice the clouds in the sky. There's lots of white billowy clouds in our county just hanging out. Well, I'm from the state of New Mexico, and that's what we have. That's natural with the thermals and the air that we have up there in the high altitude. These are so artificial. I've never seen anything like it, except for the last month or so. And all of you who are fighting the airplane noise, you're involved in that organization. Jimmy Panetta, which Gary Arnold's an expert on, is now on that board. He's supposed to be the medium between the FAA and us, and we have more airport traffic. And lastly, there's a new company that opened up to help with the EMFs called Lives Up. They're for real, they're very good. Next door to Trader Joe's in Santa Cruz and CVS, they have all kinds of products. They work. Lots of crystals and essentials. Thank you.
Thank you, young lady. I think Gary Arnold's got a few things to say here.
Yeah, I gave a little handout for you there. You'll notice the first page shows Time Magazine, 1942. This is at the very beginning of the war. And we find John Foster Dulles providing an agenda for the Protestant churches, for the World Council of Churches. And they claim that the conference most important assertion was that many of the duties performed in local and national governments can now effectively be carried out only by international authority. That's what we have with Agenda 21 and AMBAG, which is a regional agency. And it also talks about the regulation of international trade and population movements among nations. That's exactly what we're having. This is all 1942. And it says that jurisdiction, international administrative bodies with necessary powers and adequate international peace force and provision for enforcement of worldwide economic authority. Also, I show by federal officials, and it would supersede state and local laws. Richard Nixon, when he was first put in, he issued executive orders, divided the country into 10 regions, and executive order after executive orders put power into the centralizing of the government. And there's a picture there of Prescott Bush, who selected Richard Nixon to run for office because the Democratic congressman was opposing the International Monetary Fund. And since that time, that's skull and bones, Prescott Bush, selecting Nixon, who joined Hubert Humphrey in 1948, pushing for a world government, etc. And it was Nixon who appointed H.W. Bush as ambassador to the United Nations, and then Ford, following him, appointed him to the CIA and as ambassador to Communist China. But the emphasis here is that it's the administration. The real damage is, according to a lady's deal, and I didn't reproduce this, she pushed hard for a 2-term limitation. And she says 15 states have done it. She says it was the worst thing she ever did. It didn't dissipate power, it transferred it. It put the unelected people, the staffs and consultants and lobbyists and political parties in charge. She said freshman legislators were now trading votes for promises when they reached the end of their term limits. The new lobbyists had historic knowledge of the process, and the unelected were the ones that were in charge. So I totally disagree with the conclusion of the move you're going to see tonight, because it strips away your elected representatives and it puts into power the lobbyists, the political parties, and the trained managers from that 1313 network, which will run your local city.
Can we listen to David's presentation before you start going off on it?
Thank you so much, Gary. That'll end the announcements except for one more thing, and it is on the 20th of June. We will have Elena Freeland here. She'll be on 5G, geoengineering, and you. Chemtrails, HARP, and the full dominance of planet Earth under an ionized sky, from chemtrails to the space fence lockdown. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sending this invitation out. If anybody is using the Wi-Fi in the building, I would request that you don't do anything that uses a lot of bandwidth. No video or anything like that, because we need the bandwidth for this presentation. Thank you.
Do you want me to announce them?
Yeah, go ahead. You can do that now.
Hi, guys. So, having graduated from the University of Texas, for 28 years, David Zuniga was a professional engineer designing schools, churches, auto dealerships, offices, retail, and industrial buildings. He has been a general contractor, land developer, surveyor, book editor, scuba instructor.
Yeah, hi, David.
Hello.
You're being introduced right now. Hold on.
Book editor, scuba instructor, missionary pilot, and founder of 4 classical Christian K-12 schools in 3 states. Shocked at the government's fraud of 9/11, beginning in 2006, David
start your screen share.
spent 14 months in seclusion and read...
What about the recording?
He read 110 vital books.
Yeah, we're recording it.
He then drafted...
Okay.
Hi, David. I'm telling people who you are. So he then drafted the America Again Declaration, refining the document with help from many Americans, including Patriot Radio show host Mike Church and constitutional scholar and author Edwin Vieira Jr. Establishing America Again Trust with his brother in 2009, David wrote his first book, Fear the People, further refine the full spectrum action plan to restore popular sovereignty and American rule of law. His newest booklets are Tactical Civics, Our First Right Now, and Mission to America. David has been a guest on InfoWars Nightly News and radio shows across America. His articles have appeared on many conservative blogs, forums, and alternative media. David and his wife of 41 years have 2 children and 6 grandchildren, and they live in the hill country of Texas, where they serve no king but King Jesus. We are so pleased to welcome David Zuniga.
Well, thanks very much, Rod and Therese, and thank you, Bruce, for inviting me to address Freedom Forum tonight. I'll try to present this in an hour. I think it should work. Well, having had my nose buried in R&D for almost 10 years now with Tactical Civics, almost 40 volunteers from all walks of life, from missionaries to former Secret Service agents, to engineers, to software developers, to corporate. That this is actually new. The Founding Fathers gave us everything that I'm going to talk about tonight, almost all of it, except the modern tech that makes today the most exciting time in the history of the world. I know a lot of Americans, maybe some of you, feel just the opposite, like so many of the things we loved are being destroyed. On one end of the political spectrum, people think that Obama opened the last act in America's final destruction, and then on the other end of the spectrum, people think that Trump is opening up the last act. I believe that both ends of that spectrum are wrong. The original hijacking of our Constitution began when Abe Lincoln was in the White House. Most people don't know that Abe and Karl Marx were mutual admirers, that Marx was Horace Greeley's star foreign correspondent for the New York Tribune. And back then, Karl Marx was the toast of the New York City's Konieczny. And I guess for many folks in New York City, he still is. But here's my first point. Here's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah, Washington, D.C. is the most lawless, ruthless city-state in history. It rules the world with a crooked claw. But I'm just trying to make you aware that this is very old news. By the time Woodrow Wilson was president, 8 out of the 10 planks in Marx's Communist Manifesto had already become Washington, D.C. policy. So understand, our governments, and when I say governments, I mean the federal, the state, the county, many of the city governments, as you folks in California really know this, have been communist by Marx's definition of communism for a century now. So when you let that sink in, when you realize, wow, we've been communist, actually programmatically communist for a century. Okay, you realize it's not the end of the world, folks. Our side, the side of constitutional conservatism, is gaining the momentum now. Okay, so let me begin with some basic civics, because most of us didn't get this in school, even though I suspect that most of you in this group are going to know most of this stuff. Like I say, I can't take anything for granted. I still like to review it, because one point kind of builds on another, and we end up with tactical civics. So fundamentally, what is America? What's in our DNA as a people under the surface that's made our civilization, that's made our republic so different from any other on earth? Whether good or bad, people will agree all over the world, yeah, the Americans are different. We're really different. And we know that. When we go live somewhere else for a period of time or visit, and we come back home, we really realize we are fundamentally different from any other people on earth. What is it that makes us that way? Well, I contend, strategically at the highest level, the big picture level, is that America is the society and the liberty and the economy that is secured by our U.S. Constitution. If the Constitution was not here, had never been here, we would not be the people that we are today. Our rule of law, our economics, our legal system, nothing would be the same as it is today. Okay, but what's the Constitution? This is important, folks. This is really basic, but so many people don't get this. The U.S. Constitution is America's highest human law. It's law, in which we the people create and then define and then limit a federal servant. It's not a law for we the people, it's a law by we the people. I've said this for years and years. Every time I go on the radio or TV or whatever, people, we are not under the Constitution. We are over it. We are over it. And we are the only human agent that is over it in these United States. This is basic civics, it's bedrock. Huge number of Americans are totally ignorant of that fact. Okay, so a few years ago, we founded a private perpetual charitable trust and member organization to launch and to propagate tactical civics. And what is tactical civics? Tactical civics is, what is it doing? What is it for? It's creating and defining and leading a new marketplace, a new way of life that is true and functioning and actual popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty just means we, the people, are actually sovereign, just like we say in the Constitution, in our highest law. I know we stipulated in the Constitution that we, the people, are at the top of the heap and all that, but we don't live like it, do we? In fact, if you survey world history, you'll find monarchies, oligarchies, plutocracies, that's ruled by the wealthy, kleptocracies, that's ruled by thieves and scoundrels. But even though we set all this out, popular sovereignty, in our highest law, we Americans have never actually lived it out. We've never lived out popular sovereignty, never, not once. Obviously, neither has any other population in history, but so now we founded tactical civics because it's time to actually do what the Constitution stipulates, what we stipulate in that law that we're going to do. People ask me, where did you get the name tactical civics? It's such a weird, how did you put those two words together and why? Well, tactical is defined as operations that are smaller, closer to base, and of less long-term significance than strategic. Something is strategic when you're looking at it from a very high level. It's tactical when you're looking at it from a more immediate level, down and home. Remember, we said that strategically, America is defined by our Constitution, the highest law, where we the people take the king of the hill position, right? So then the next word, civics, is just in our context here in America, is just who's boss? Who's boss? Well, we are. We set that out in the first three words of the Constitution. We the people do ordain. Oh yeah? Oh yeah? Why don't we live like it? Okay, so our mission at Tactical Civics is to educate, inspire, support, supply, and organize our members for real, true, actual patriotism. We define patriotism as we the people making our servant government obey the U.S. Constitution. That, folks, as far as I'm concerned, is the best definition of patriotism. Not waving flags, not saying nice chants or Bellamy Pledge or anything else. It's we the people making our servant in government obey the U.S. Constitution. Now, Tactical Civics is not another one of what I call Constitution appreciation courses. There's probably, I don't know, 50 or whatever individuals and organizations today that teach the Constitution. They're all over the place. That's like teaching people a law, but never enforcing the law. Why teach them the law if you're never going to enforce it, right? It's not a law. It's like it doesn't exist. That's like me teaching you music appreciation for the next 20 years instead of actually helping you to learn to play music, right? You can take all the music appreciation you want, you're never going to play a note. So Constitution appreciation is when you go to these courses or buy these books or do these online things that, you learn and learn and learn about the Constitution. So what? Today there are people in groups also that want to change the Constitution. They want another convention. They want an Article 5 convention. There's others that say that the Constitution is dead. I say baloney. We're the only organization, Tactical Civics is the only organization helping Americans to actually enforce our highest American law. And guess what? We, the people, are the only authority, like I said a minute ago, that's over the U.S. Constitution. So we're the only ones that can see to its enforcement. Okay? Here I've drawn a little graphic. The big bar of gold is us. We the people, the apex sovereign, the highest sovereign there is in America. We're the top of the hierarchy. And in the Constitution, like I said, we the people, I just told you a minute ago, we create and we define and we limit federal servants. So here's the three federal servants down below. We've got the legislature, we've got the administrative branch, and we've got the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, that we founded. We created this judicial branch, the Supreme Court. Now we allow in Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution, we authorize the legislature, Congress, to create its own federal courts that are inferior to our Supreme Court, okay? So we allow the creature of our creature to be born. We create the legislature, then we let them create federal courts. Folks, if you don't get anything else out of tonight, please get this. Please understand this. When you walk into a federal courtroom and you're all chicken, when the bailiff walks in and all rise, why would I want to rise? That dude works for me. He works for the people that work for me. The people whom I pay, whose pay and lifelong benefits I pay in Congress. They hired this guy. They created his court. This guy or gal in the black robe. These are the creatures of our creature, Congress. Remember that about the federal courts. It is very important for us, for the American people, to learn civics. Until we learn civics and stop being afraid of the creature of our creature, we're going to be pissed backwards forever. Well, I won't go into all of the ways that in our books, which I'll talk about in a minute, I explain how we can stop the federal courts, these crazy federal courts.
Please.
We've always had the power to stop them. We explained it in our books, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so we're the only authority that's over the Constitution, okay? Now, think of the basically conservative American people. Here's the American people as depicted in the last presidential election, 2016 presidential election, broken down by precinct, not by county, but all the way down to the precinct level. Notice how conservative America is. Look how red that map is. Now, I'm not talking about big piece of Arizona, big piece of New Mexico, smaller pieces of California, and bigger pieces, really, of Texas along the border. But look at the country generally. This republic is conservative. Conservative. If you get away from the major metro areas, we're very conservative. But devious men, for a long, long time now, with a lust for power, have taken us hostage. And it's something that our founding fathers said. They told us it would happen, they knew it would happen, and they tried to make provision against this happening, against big power ever coming to bear against us. The way they did it, now there's something you probably don't know. In the 1787 Constitutional Convention, don't start reading that screen yet. Just listen to me for a minute. Look at George Washington there. Okay, in the 1787 Convention, George Washington didn't speak to that group all those 4 months of the convention until the very last day. For a couple of weeks, he had been prodded every day by Nathaniel Gorham, who had been asking the delegates to make a change in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 4 of the Constitution, where it said 40,000 people per district. And, well, it didn't actually say per district, but it said one representative for every 40,000 people. And Gorham said, that's too many, that's too many, that's too much power. And so finally, on the last day, after bugging Washington, Washington got up to speak to the plenary session of the convention. And here's what James Madison says in his Records of the Federal Convention on page 644. When the president rose, he said that although his situation had hitherto restrained him from offering his sentiments, he could not forbear expressing his wish that the alteration proposed might take place. The smallness of the proportion of representatives had been considered by many members of the convention an insufficient security for the rights and the interests of the people. He acknowledged that it had always appeared to himself among the exceptionable, and that just means the bad, they take exception, the exceptionable parts of the plan. As late as the present moment was for admitting amendments, he thought this of so much consequence that it would give much satisfaction to see it adopted. So by unanimous vote, after Washington sat down, everyone in the convention hall voted yes to change Article 1, Section 2, Clause 4. Instead of 40,000, it would be one representative for every 30,000. Okay? So George Washington knew, as everyone in that convention knew, the bigger you let a politician get, the more quote-unquote constituents you let that person have, the more power they have, the more corrupt they're going to become. So, 2 years later, after the convention, while the states were still, the ratified conventions were trying to figure out, hey, do we really want this new constitution? James Madison and his committee for what came to be called the Bill of Rights, the amendments that the states' rights people were demanding, or they would not ratify. They were demanding this Bill of Rights. So Madison's group, the committee came up with, I think, 25, and only 12 of them passed Congress. So Congress passed these 12. It became known as the Bill of Rights. Article the first, the very first one, was this thing that had so bothered President Washington. And it reads like this. Article the first. After the first enumeration required by the first article of the Constitution, there shall be one representative for every 30,000, until the number shall amount to 100, after which the proportion shall be so regulated by Congress that there shall be not less than 100 representatives, nor less than one representative for every 40,000 persons, until the number of representatives shall amount to 200, after which the proportion shall be so regulated by Congress that there shall not be less than 200 representatives, nor more than one representative for every 50,000 persons. Now, 12 states ratified that. But only 11 sent their paperwork into the U.S. Archivist after ratifying. Second thoughts, that the members of the House in Connecticut had second thoughts because of one word that was mistranscribed on the copies that were sent out to the states. And it was mistranscribed. You can see this little red arrow here that points to where it says nor less than one representative. But the way Samuel Otis transcribed it is he said nor more than, there shouldn't be more than one representative for every 50. In other words, he flipped it. Now, some people guess that maybe Madison was the bad guy or Samuel Otis was the bad guy and they actually, meant to do this. I don't know. It may have just been a transcribing error. But you see here, this is a 1789 broadside in the Philadelphia paper, and you can see clearly it says, nor less than one representative. There shall not be less than one representative for every 50,000 persons. In other words, they wanted small districts. That was the deal, small districts.
Right.
Not a lot of power. So what happened because of that mess up of one word? If you see what I showed you before, you see it says nor more than one representative, for every 50,000 people. They got it backwards in the final transcription. And so the Connecticut legislature said, no, unless you fix it, we're going to hold our paperwork. We already ratified, I know, but we're not going to send our ratification paperwork in. So just because of Connecticut, only 11 votes were counted, so it wasn't quite 75% of the states. And then in 1790, 1791, 1792, 1793, as states kept getting added to the Union, they were all voting for this. They all voted to pass this original First Amendment, but it wasn't enough because there were more states now and more, so you needed more and more. So there was never quite the 75%, all because of Connecticut's mess up. So here we are, 240 years later, and we still have an open item. Okay? It was always clear what George Washington meant, and here's what we would have. If we had listened to Washington, if Connecticut hadn't messed up, if we had this original First Amendment finally ratified, look at California. you would have 783 U.S. House districts. You would have 783 representatives if the Founding Fathers had been followed. We here in Texas would have 549. Now, people say, well, that's way too many, it's way too many. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But let me just throw one number out at you right now. The same 320 million Americans right now today have 7,383 representatives in our state legislatures. We're the same 320 million people. Why are we not saying it's too many that we have 7,383 at the state level and only 435 plus 100 senators at the federal? That's crazy. It's too much power. It's not, don't look at it in terms of it's too many no, look at it, the districts are too big right now. We need small districts, cut their power. So here's what we have now. Look at California, 53. You have 53 representatives. Where do you think they are? Most of them are where the people are, the big cities. So most of California, if you remember our map, let me go back to it here, if I can, go all the way back. Look at our map. Whoops, whoopsie. If you look at the actual land area of California, most of it is conservative by precinct. Okay, so if you had people say, oh, so if we have 6,400 members of the House, the big cities are going to have that many more too. Well, yes, they are. But now, let me go back one more time. If you go over here, I'll go to the new map here. If you go to, say, Montana, Wyoming, North or South Dakota, they have one. They have one. Alaska, they have one. So you know, Vermont, they have one. You know if they only have one voice, most of the state is not being represented. So in California, this is a particular problem, as you all well know. You're trying to split into either 2 states or 3 states or completely, there are so many things, and this has been going on in California for 40 years or more. The whole idea of the very cattywampus apportionment of the state of California has been a problem for a long time. Same thing in the state of New York, same thing in the states, and several of the states have the same problem. Illinois is another one. This has to be fixed. We need to go back to what the Founding Fathers gave us. So if you're in Wisconsin, you should have 115 seats. 115 voices, not 8. If you're in New York, you shouldn't have 27. You should have 396. You see the difference this would make? The rural areas of the country, the small towns, the 31,000 towns under 10,000 people, all over this country would finally have a voice for the first time. So, today, by the way, the average district has over 750,000 people. Some of them have as many as 900,000. That is too much power for one person. There's no way for that person to ever meet or come close to ever meeting or knowing all of those people, obviously. So what happens? Industry buys those seats. Has done for a long, long time, at least a century. All right, so how do we fix this? Step 1, we break up Congress into small, relatively powerless districts, like I'm saying, as the Founding Fathers intended. First right in the Bill of Rights, there it's been waiting for us. All we have to do is finish it. So on our website, we offer this little booklet, Our First Right Now, subtitled How Congress Stole Our First Right in the Original Bill of Rights, and How Americans Will Reclaim the People's House. And it's only 12 pages. It's free. You can get it on our website, tacticalcivics.com. So when you download this, you can read the story of how Connecticut messed up and, the history of it and how Samuel Otis messed up with his transcribing and all of that. It's all in there. But we can finish this today, folks. We can finish what the Founding Fathers began. The original first right in the Bill of Rights. And that's what this little book is about. Booklet. So in 27 more states, out of these, you see the dark states here. There are 39 of them who haven't yet acted. Under Article 5, there is an item open for action by the states for 240 years now almost. Been open for action under Article 5, sitting there, the original first right, and all of these states, many of them don't even know it exists. And when they do, when we talk to legislators, they kind of scratch their head and look, you know, and think, oh, well, how nice. They have no idea. So we have prepared some documents, a sort of an action kit for legislators, giving them the history, giving them a frequently asked questions, and even giving them a joint resolution all ready to go that they can, you know, hold their vote. Very, very simple. This is the original first right in the Bill of Rights. It's time to ratify it. This is not a left or right issue. This is not a libertarian or, you know, GOP. It's non-political. Everyone should be for this. This is better representation, smaller districts, less power for politicians. Everyone should be for this. So here are the 39 states that are left to go. We only need 27 to vote yay. And we will have small districts. How do you like that?
Yep.
Now that's step one. Okay. Oh, by the way, let me tell you that Gregory Watson, a University of Texas student, many years ago, began in 1983, he found that the same thing had happened with the original Second Amendment, the one about they can't give themselves a pay raise until there's an election shall have intervened. And it sat there for 203 years at the time, and so Greg Watson, a UT student, carried that thing through 39 more, through I don't know how many more. He needed 29 more states, and he got them. It took him 10 years, but one guy actually has done this before. So if for the original Second Amendment, which was a very small import actually, if one guy could do that, can't we do this? I think we can. Okay, so then the second step, after we break them up and we end up with 6,400 members, where are they going to sit? They won't fit on Capitol Hill with their staff. They won't be able to sit in the main chamber. The House chamber holds maybe, at maximum, including the upper stages up there, holds maybe 575, maybe 600 people. They won't fit. Where are you going to put? Well, we bring them home. Now we describe this, and I'm going to describe it more in a minute, but in another little booklet called Tactical Civics, it's now in its third edition, 38 pages. It's free also for the download at tacticalcivics.com. And we explain this first of 22 reform laws we want, and it's called the Bring Congress Home Act. And it's about time we do this. Somebody in the world has to use technology for the highest and best use. The first distributed legislature in history. Here's what we call for in the Bring Congress Home Act. Number one, members will receive only one modest office, and it has to be located in their home district. They cannot work in Washington, D.C. anymore. Number two, they're going to be limited to 2 terms, either house. House or Senate, you only get 2 terms. Number three, congressmen can only have a staff of 2. Now they can have as many volunteers as they like, since they'll be working from their hometown. They might have a lot of volunteer staff, that's fine. But only 2 paid staff. Senators can have 6 paid staff. Congressmen will receive half of their present salary, which is about $95,000, is half of what they get now, about $197,000. Because their district is only 1/15 the size of what it is today. It's very good money for that small a district. They will receive no benefits. Since we want short-term statesmen, they're term limited. They can only serve 2 or 4 years. We don't want careerist politicians anymore, so they have no benefits. And their budget will be audited, and it will be reported on their website every year. So that's what we're calling for. It's about time we do this. We're the employer, and our employees have always written their own ticket. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, so we break Congress up, then we bring Congress home, and you know, when you keep them home full-time, where we get to oversee and influence them, rather than lobbyists schmoozing and industry bigwigs, you know, socializing with them every night.
Hey, can you hear us?
No.
Well, more importantly,
Can you hear
though,
us?
if you think of the millions of honest, competent Americans who would run for a House seat if they don't have to live or work in D.C.,
This is live.
who only have a small office with a staff of 2, who are only going to be serving the 50,000 people that live closest to them, it's a very different kind of a gig. It's a very, we're now asking of ourselves something that a lot of us could do and would do.
That's New
And
Hampshire.
this is the key.
New Hampshire does this.
See, when we do this, when we break them up into small pieces, when we bring them home, we transform American government more fundamentally than we've ever done. I mean, ever. I mean, this is more fundamental even than the Constitution was from the original Articles of Confederation. This is huge. Now, that's the initial action plan of tactical civics. It won't be easy. That's just our initial plan. I think Trump might be the perfect champion to push it through once we start growing to scale. He won't do it until we're big, until, you know, he sees something big happening that he doesn't want to get left out of. But he'll want to get the credit for something this big if it gets big. We can use Donald Trump's ego to push our action projects. There is more to tactical civics than just those 2 things. For instance, our long-term objectives, the biggest thing, this is where I began as an engineer, this is where I began 10 years ago, was with our proposed mobile app. It's called the America Again Indictment Engine. And I won't get into it tonight because that just confuses people. And we're years away from this, but it's law enforcement. It's not politics, it's law enforcement. You get to do from your mobile device what you do now with weather, or with, you know, Amazon, buying stuff, or ordering your groceries from your grocery store, or doing whatever. All these things we do, but in politics we're blind. We don't see what they're doing. We can't track it. We can't know that when they pass something unconstitutional, there's nothing we can do about it. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. So we're developing an app using the machine learning Microsoft Azure platform. Right now, machine learning is moving so fast in text analytics, statistical functions, anomaly detection and stuff. When you start reading through laws and all that stuff, to get language AI to the point we need it for our app, we're probably 2 to 3 years away from that. So we're watching what machine learning tech guys are doing right now, and we're still a couple of years away from being able to do what we want to do, but that's coming. And when it is, I just want to tell you, this will function with less than 0.5% of adult Americans being involved. You don't need 51%. You don't have to, this isn't like politics. This is law enforcement. When they pass a law, the second that law goes into the record, when they file the law, not pass the law, all they have to do is file it. They're already conspiring to violate the highest law of the land, and we can get them. We can indict them criminally at that point on a harmonizing state statute. So anyway, I didn't want to get into the engine tonight, but that's one of our long-term objectives. We have 21 other reform laws besides the Bring Congress Home Act that we want to do. I won't go into that either tonight. But through them, we'll recover everything we've lost to Washington, D.C. organized crime, to what they call the deep state that works for D.C. organized crime. We've known about this since Donald Cressy. The book on your left, Theft of the Nation, was written in 1969 by a criminologist, a famous criminologist named Donald Cressy, who described in great detail the structure and operations of organized crime in America, starting in Washington, D.C., and leading to all the state houses. This criminologist named names, gave copies of memoranda. He showed how it's criminal. This was in 1969. Before that, the book here in the middle, War is a Racket, by General, U.S. Marine Corps General Smedley Butler, called War is a Racket. Butler, back in 1935, described how the military is being used all over the world for the banking industry, for the oil industry, for the fruit and the sugar and the this and the that, all the industries that use the U.S. military as their gophers. Free! They don't pay them a cent. So the racketeering has been going on a long, okay, and the last book here, the one on the right, by Professor Thomas Di Lorenzo, Organized Crime, The Unvarnished Truth About Government, just kind of updates what these other two guys wrote about many, many years ago and shows just how crooked, just how corrupt, just how illegal our government is. We need to take control over this, and we can. So that's the longer term plan of tactical civics. For right now, we just want to break them up, and we just want to bring them home. If we just keep our mind on those two things, we'll go a long way. Now you can see at our website, it's tacticalcivics.com. You can get a lot of stuff. There's a lot of free things. We try not to charge for things. We ask you to join if you can. It's $9 a month. And then, but we give away almost everything. On Memorial Day, we will have 3 new books out. The newest, the 3rd edition of Tactical Civics comes out. The Chapter Leader Handbook comes out, also on Memorial Day. And a 4-week crash course in Tactical Civics. You can break it down for your small group over a 4-week period. It's called Mission to America. That one's also coming out on the 30th of this month. So we have 3 booklets coming out at the end of this month. You can get, if you want to spread the good news, spread the word, you can get things like mugs and bumper stickers and caps and shirts and all kinds of things on our website. You just go to the website under shop and click on that and you'll see all this stuff. We would like people to start telling folks, you know what? You're so cynical, you're so down in the mouth. Did you know about Tactical Civics? Have you ever heard of it? Show them, tell them. We have power like you wouldn't believe. And I know you've never heard any of this stuff until tonight, but once you get on our website and once you start reading the free booklets, you're going to say, wow. So those 40 people that Zuniga had working for the last 10 years, they've really been doing stuff. They've been digging up a lot. This is a lot of stuff that we can do. This is real power. It is. It's Americans setting mankind's new gold standard. Popular sovereignty, like I said, it's we the people, we stipulated in the Constitution, there it is. But now finally we get to enforce it. We get to actually do popular sovereignty. We will be the first people in history to ever do that. How cool is that? And we can do that. It's up to us. It's not up to DC. It's not up to Trump. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to us. You're not like your neighbor, or you wouldn't be at this meeting tonight if you were like your neighbors. You're probably not a lot like the neighbors. You're different. We like different. We like those who say, you know, I want to do something. I'm tired of the bitching and moaning. I want to do something. If you like to step out and do, you know, be an early adopter and do things that might make a lot of difference in the world, join us. We invite you to join us. It's going to be fun. It's going to be an adventure. We're not quite sure where everything's going to lead. It's going to be very challenging. Our descendants are going to read about us having done this, folks. Nobody has ever had the technology that we have today to be able to do the tactical force massing, to do what we're doing now with Tactical Civics. It is really going to be an adventure. our descendants will read about it. But more than that, our descendants need us to take responsibility, because we can now. We have the power to do it now with the internet. We've got to do this thing. Well, that's Tactical Civics in a nutshell. And I will take any questions you have that pertain to our mission. Not general political stuff. I don't like politics, but anything pertaining to what I've spoken about.
Are you there? Okay, so we're going to take questions. The microphone is to talk to David is right here, so if you can line up here. Then please limit your questions only to the Tactical Civics program and to how to implement it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for being here. Okay.
Just talking to them.
You're welcome.
Anyway, I saw your graph with California. You're showing it all red. What you don't know is that the Republicans in the state of California belong to the Rippon Society, the Main Street Republicans, the Lincoln Club, and our own district right here is paid for by Charles Munger. So unless you designate the difference between a good Republican and a bad Republican, I don't see the tactics being involved here. The people here are familiar with the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, etc. They know there's an invisible government there. I heard nothing mentioned about that. And I didn't hear any of your advisors having any political race experience whatsoever. And I would think the first thing would be to have the United States Senate be selected by the state legislature, which was the original set to help break up the states' right. I think that would be a much better way to go. I don't believe in the two-term limitation. I think we have that in California. It hasn't done us any good, and I've seen it in 15 states, and all those people are regretting they did it because it cuts the balls off their representatives.
Okay, as to the 17th Amendment, which was a disaster, which stole, which removed a big part of the design of our constitutional rule of law, that, as you said, the Senate was supposed to be the representation for the states, elected by, controlled by the states, and the House was supposed to be the people's house. So you're right about that, and that is one of our 21 actions that I didn't go into tonight because it's just too much stuff, and I didn't want to overwhelm. As far as political races and running for political races, that is not the course we're on. This is not politics, this is law enforcement. If you can wrap your brain around it, again, these books are free. If you just read the little 38-page booklet, Tactical Civics, the first chapter will sort of walk you through the sea change that this makes. When you have, in the practice of law, if you notice in constitutional law, you don't have constitutional law ever being brought up or used by the prosecution. You always have defense counsel using constitutional stuff. Why is that? Well, because we don't know how. We have nothing to grab. We have no handle to grab to enforce the Constitution, to enforce the limits on government. Now, I don't care about the GOP. The GOP, as far as I'm concerned, ever since its birth, I showed you that Lincoln was essentially a Marxist, as many people were back then. Lincoln's generals, most of Lincoln's generals during the war were Marxists. They were followers of Karl Marx. Back then, Karl Marx was considered a good guy. Nobody knew that Marxism was going to be a complete disaster, but Lincoln was a Marxist. The GOP was the party of big industry ever since its birth. In fact, before its birth, the Whig Party was the same thing. So I'm not a GOP guy, and I don't care about the GOP. I don't care about parties. Parties are anathema to me, and they shouldn't matter to anyone except that that's the game that's being played.
I do agree with that, though.
When you think about having the people actually having a law enforcement mechanism where you are now officing in your hometown. You are not in Washington, D.C. I don't think you're yet internalizing how different this will be when the person is forced to office in their hometown, they're forced to stay home where they can be watched. They can't just go to lunch with anybody and nobody knows it. Whoever they go to lunch with, people are going to see. They're in town. They have to stay in town. It's the law. Districts will be very small, so you can't, the big players are going to have a very, very hard time coming in and trying to buy these players who won't need that much money to run a campaign in an area that's, essentially like a small town. You're talking about a district of at most 50,000 people. That doesn't take a lot of money. So I know what you're saying. I know how especially in California, how dispirited you must be, and certainly are. And I've heard this for years now from Californians. Gosh,
Abraham Lincoln was not a communist.
I'm in the hill country of Texas. The Texas Hill Country is the closest thing in Texas to California geography and, topology and all of that. And so we have Californians coming here like mad, like crazy. They're moving here because, it looks and feels like California. And what are they doing? They're moving into these big subdivisions and creating a huge market need, and then they're demanding all of these things that they had back home in California. So they're turning Central Texas into a very different place, and we don't like it. Now, we love people who want to move to Texas, that's fine. But if you move to Texas, you should want to be a Texan. You should want to think more like and live more like Texans, and don't bring California here. So I know all about what you're saying, and we don't want to face that here. And, we're already having to face it on a small scale. But what I'm saying is, if you start thinking about, imagine this. Imagine going to Capitol Hill, that big building, and seeing that building turned into a multi-use, hotel, motel, restaurants, shops, that kind of thing. That's what we want to do. Donald Trump already did that with the old U.S. Post Office just down the street. This can happen. Now, when we take them out of that city, it's going to be a different kind of person who serves in Congress. And I disagree with you that term limits don't make a difference. They absolutely make a difference. If I believe, ever since I'm 9 years old, I believe that I can have a life in politics. It's very different from having a 4-year stint in politics, or at most a 12-year stint if I run for Senate. But again, Senate's going to be just as hard as it is now because there's only 100 seats, and we're not talking about changing that because the Founding Fathers didn't talk about changing that. But we do have to overturn the 17th Amendment. Absolutely, that's coming. But that's not the first thing we're going to do. We have to break up the House. It's where the power of the person's sword resides. It's where essentially the power of D.C. right now, the deep state resides in the U.S. House. If we break them up into small pieces and then force them to come home where we can watch them and put them under full-time observation and whatever.
Accountability.
Accountability, yeah. Parole, whatever you want to call it.
Probation.
A different kind of a person who runs for these offices. If you know you don't have to move to D.C., you know you don't have to be wealthy, you know you don't have to schmooze with all of these people, a different kind of a more normal, productive American is going to say, I can do that. I run a business and I run it well. I know, I'll do it. I'll run it. I'll try it for 2 years. It's just a whole different way of looking at politics at the federal level. Here's another thing that I'd like you to think about. I was, for many years, designed buildings. That's what I did for a living, including institutional buildings. And I know, because I study architectural history, that monumental architecture is meant to do one thing. It is meant to inspire awe or fear in human beings. The architecture of scale and of stability and of permanence, monumental architecture is meant to make a person either fear or have, be in awe. Now, people use that when they design huge homes or whatever, mansions, whatever. They want people to be in awe and fear, whatever. I call it granite dome syndrome. You see it in Sacramento. You see it right in your own, under the granite dome right there in your state. We see it in every state. When people move in under that granite dome, they have the trappings of power every day. They feel a certain way because the psychology of architecture of the built environment changes the way you feel inside that built environment or outside it when you're walking up to it. If it's very large and very permanent and it looks like you could never move it, then you're more afraid of it than if it's small and rickety. Okay? This is ever since the ancient Romans used to use it to, as Rome captured all of these peoples from the entire Mediterranean basin, you had these big strapping chieftains come to Rome to visit with their hordes, and they were in awe of the architecture. It was meant to do that. It's meant to make you afraid, and that's what your state building that you own in Sacramento. That's what it does when you go there. And don't tell me that it doesn't. When you walk into that building and you look up at that rotunda, you look up at the dome and you look at all these, it does something to you. Well, it does something to them too. Within a week of taking office, they have busloads of kids coming to visit and gawk at them, their 30-foot ceilings and marble floors and all of that. And they have their retinue of staff constantly, the honorable this and the honorable that. It's all bullshit.
There's nothing honorable about them.
There's nothing honorable about them. Exactly. Amen. Now, we shouldn't be putting
Citizens should be higher
in life.
than
Do we see
legislators.
an employer come to gather with his employees and, can I have a picture taken with you? Can I have a picture taken with you, employee? It makes no sense. How do they set their own salary? How do they set their own staffing? I don't know, but we've got to get a brain.
Yep. I do agree with that. Absolutely.
Okay, can you hold on for just a second? We're going to pass a hat here, and then we'll have the next question in a few seconds.
Yeah, thanks, David. This is awesome. I just want to ask everybody to help us continue. Our volunteers don't take anything. It all goes to expenses, and we aren't meeting our expenses at this time. And we'd like to, do more programs like this and even have live speakers, and that takes a lot more. So if you can help us, we're going to pass a hat. Thank you. And David, please go ahead and continue.
Okay, here's the next question.
I'm just speaking on my
Our next speaker, so that's next month. That's going to take some resources. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Samson, and I'm having some concern with this new party. I'm really proud of you that you're doing this every year, and I hope that it takes off. And once it does take off, then I'm really hoping that you'll consider some of the people that were here before anybody else came here, indigenous people. I'm an enrolled member of the Muskogee Nation. I've been helping some political prisoners named Leonard Peltier, among many other people. And how is that interaction with the native people here and the different tribes I hope you will consider becoming friends with them and building a better relationship than the one we have now. Because these people are just locking people up, violating their rights. We have an inalienable rights granted by God that nobody should be able to take over. And I believe the Constitution is just, writing down rights that we already have. So Leonard's been violated for a long time, and would really appreciate if we can work together. And I support what you're doing, and I'm really proud of you. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I love your name. Very strong name. I would say that you can take almost any issue, certainly the issue of the Western lands or tribal issues, and say, if you make it more local, what will happen? If the congressmen who write these laws and who fund all of these agencies and these bureaus, if they live there, won't that make a difference? They're living under the conditions that everybody else is now. They're seeing and hearing everything that you see and hear, and they can't leave. In other words, it will be illegal for them to open an office in Washington, D.C.
If anybody is on the internet, please get off.
Okay.
Hello, David, can you hear us now? Hello?
All right.
Yeah, but now look what happened. Asked at the beginning that nobody should be using bandwidth.
I'm on my own. This is my own data.
Yeah, but you're going through our Wi-Fi, which only has limited capacity. Please stop it.
Okay.